I won't deny it, I'm a Southsider, you don't wanna mess with me. Got the police looking for me, but I'm calm cause I'm smoking that CBD. Said I won't deny it, I'm a Southsider, you don't wanna mess with me. Got the police looking for me, but I'm chillin' in the back of the VIP. Said we won't deny it, we are Southsiders, you don't wanna mess with us. Got the police looking for us, but there's nothing that they can't do when you're chilling with the Blessed Life podcast crew. Hit us with some stuff, Matt. Hit us with some stuff.
Hey, you wanna roll with me? Gotta rock that safe to the T. I don't know if you can see, but we ain't even close to free. Trying to survive in the Shot City. No, I ain't even no straight OG. Just chilling with my boy Tierney. So roll it up and smoke some trees. Peace.
Good deal. Keep it real. One of the gubernatorial candidates, Mr. Darren Bailey, I think they have a clip of him saying, if I'm elected governor, I'll repeal this law immediately or something. So it's like, and then you wonder, like, Mr. Bailey, do you really have beef with the law, or are you just saying that
to get political capital?
To get political capital?
Ride that wave.
Or is, and granted, it could be how he really feels. The question in the end of the day is getting to the bottom of truth and the facts about how this will play out. If it's a good law, then hopefully it stays. If it's not, then hopefully it gets appealed. But what we're trying to do is open people's minds to all this. And Claudia, one thing I was going to mention to you, push the microphone a little bit farther, like in toward your computer screen.
That's okay.
Or that's fine
there?
too.
Okay.
The reason being is sometimes you would look directly at me, but you wouldn't speak directly in the camera, and your voice wasn't being direct because I was adjusting the volume up or down so that it didn't sound like you were more quiet this minute and then you were louder when you're directly in the microphone.
Okay.
So just a heads up, either speak directly in the microphone or like push it closer to the monitor so it's capturing your voice even when you're speaking toward me more. But so all right, so. What do we have next here on our list?
So we talked about the danger to society part a lot, right? So now the second part is the willful flight standard, right? Do they pose a flight risk? That's what we call. So now they use that term willful flight. What does that mean exactly? Because this is brand new.
Yeah,
so,
there's some contention about that.
So let me give you an example. Right now, an appearance in court is basically the standard, right, for making any pretrial decisions. And it fails to account for the reasons why someone wouldn't show up to court. Okay, so for example, a defendant doesn't show up to court because they were supposed to get a ride and their ride bailed on them at the last minute. And let's say they live, I don't know, all the way in Joliet or something, okay, and the ride at the very last minute bails. Okay, well, now they're not going to be, even if they had the money to afford an Uber or, I don't know, is there public transportation that even goes that? I don't even know. But let's assume there's no way for them to get to court. And a lot of people also fail to realize that a lot of defendants do not have phones. They really don't, okay? So if someone, let's say, doesn't have a phone, so now they can't call their attorney. Or maybe, you know what, even if they have a phone and they call the attorney and the attorney's already in court, okay, well, the attorney's in court. How is the attorney going to know what happened to his or her clients? Then a warrant will be issued for their arrest, right? And then let's say they're picked up immediately or the next day or whatever. Then they're going to have this background that they have all these failures to appear in court. So now, in the judge's mind right now, when they're setting bail in the current statute, it's like, oh, wait a minute. There's 10 failures to appear in his background, and they don't know what that means. That's just, because the state's attorneys say, well, they didn't show up to court, but we're not understanding why he didn't show up to court. Whereas now, this willful flight standard that's being implemented refocuses the court on the historical concern of evasion of prosecution. Yeah. Okay, so now Does this individual have a history of, fleeing to another jurisdiction whenever he has a court case? If the state's attorney is able to establish that fact
If
pattern,
he's a first-time offender, it might be the
Right.
first time he fleed, so you can't tell what the history
then you
of some
can't
people is.
you can't argue
Hey.
he's a flight risk if he's never been arrested before. You can't argue that. But if this is, let's say, his 10th time getting arrested,
Right.
and every single time they find him in California, okay, all right,
not a
now
good
he's
look.
So a bad
not a good
criminal who
look.
doesn't have a history of fleeing is
Yeah,
the
yeah.
guy you want, right? You're like, you committed a lot of crimes, but at least you stuck
Right.
around and paid your debts to
But
society
now,
like a man.
do you see the difference between
Yeah.
someone who is unable to get to court through no fault of their own, versus the person who flees to another jurisdiction, another state? Now they're willfully avoiding prosecution. That's the
Yeah.
flight risk that it was meant to always
It's
be,
more
but now it
nuanced.
clarifies it.
It's more nuanced. Yeah, because it says that the law provides that past non-appearance in court alone is not evidence of future intent to evade prosecution.
Correct.
So, I mean, what
It never
she's
should
saying
be,
is
but-
it shouldn't be.
Right.
It's just like, if you can provide actual nuance and reasons for it, I feel like that should be, probative in the court's
because
consideration.
when they say past
Yeah.
appearance, what they're saying is like, yeah, I mean, if you have a court hearing, you should be honorable and find a way to get there, right?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But we're dealing with
There's
criminals.
other things should be able
or
to be in
people who are being
consideration for the
accused
reasons
of
why.
crimes.
Yeah.
That may not have a way to get there, and just we're talking about people. What we're concerned about is people just trying to dodge justice and get out
Yeah.
to another state or another country.
But if you
That's
got,
what-
like she said, 10, then after a
Right.
certain point, it's like, okay, maybe we don't have reasons why you were in the court and we can't
Right.
really determine that. But I can also understand the naysayers. If we don't have reasons, but yet and still we know for fact that you have failed to appear in court 10 times, I feel like after a certain point, past non-appearance should probably be okay.
Yeah,
Like,
I made
even if you don't have
I
reasons.
think I made it like it should be a case by case
Yes,
basis.
it's case by
determination
case
before.
for
I mean,
sure.
if the history
For sure.
is like this is just what you do, well, yeah, that's some people. That's the way they operate. Like they've shown you their intentions through their actions. You know what I mean? Like I
can
intend
deduce that
Right.
there's probably
There
a
was-
problem with this one.
There was
yeah.
this great story I used to, and I just want to add this in because of its humor value or whatever. I used to extern for a federal judge. I had the honor in law school for the late great Judge John W. Darrow. He had, I remember there was a hearing and it involved federal marshals and this guy who had been deported from America 5 times. This was the I think this was his 5th time that he was going to be deported, or maybe
It's
this
persistent.
was going to be his 6th.
Yeah.
And he was injured, and so they had to take him to the hospital. So the federal marshals have him at the hospital, and he got away. And when we were in the courtroom, Judge Darrow goes to the federal marshals. He says, "You forgot to chain him down to the hospital bed, or to handcuff him to the hospital bed?" Like, yeah, we forgot.
Yeah,
so
we
this guy, just because he wasn't handcuffed,
He slips out. That's
takes
great.
off, just dips.
Oh
He's
my
out.
gosh.
He's free. He escaped
He's a
deportation.
slick- he's
And
a
this
real
was the 5th
slick
time he
Rick.
was from Brazil.
Yeah.
He had been deported to Brazil multiple times, and this was either the 5th or 6th. It was a lot of times, so we know obviously a person like that is a flight risk.
Yeah.
Right. And let me give you another example. Those with mental health issues. Now, again, everyone can have their opinion, but, having been involved in the criminal justice system, well, on the defense side at least, for the past 10 years, I come across a lot of client with mental health issues. So now you have a client with mental health issues and they forgot their court date, let's say. Again, right now under the standard, it's like, oh, well, he's a flight risk because he never shows up to court. But it's through no fault of his own. And right now, a lot of the jail population are individuals that have mental health issues that are going untreated. So what are we doing? We're making it worse because they're not getting the help that they need. We're just literally leaving them in Cook County Jail, making their condition worse.
Yeah, it
it
can't
criminalizes mental illness, and it harms their mental health even more.
Well, and let's be honest with people, because I think, the devil's advocate side of it is somebody who just has a really tough on crime stance, and like doesn't matter, like, well, just in a general sense, I'm concerned with mental health in this country because of the amount of mass shootings we've seen and other, mass violent crimes by people who, like, maybe are schizophrenic or have other issues and need to be found and diagnosed and assisted and, treated. And if those people are a danger to society, then locked up. Like, you can't have people like that free. But, just on an objective basis, if they have a legit diagnosed mental condition. But, the point is, we're not trying to punish necessarily. We're trying to make sure that they're getting the help they need, or that they're going through the proper channels. Like, they're not going into a prison cell. Like, these people are in a place that's more like a hospital to, or whatever. And they're, secured that they can't harm themselves or others and shit like that.
And a judge is allowed to order, because as a condition of release, a judge is definitely allowed to order a defendant to a mental health facility or receiving mental health services. That could be
Hopefully
part
really
of
secured.
the conditions.
That violent, or that people that have violent tendencies as part of their mental condition don't commit them.
Right. But a judge has the authority with this to order them to mental health treatment.
So it's a better thing,
Right. Whereas if they're sitting in Cook County Jail, the jail is not a treatment center.
Right.
It's making
I'm
it
sure
worse.
It's definitely
Anything but the opposite.
I can imagine. Can you imagine being in Cook County Jail during COVID? That'd have been wild.
There were a lot of clients actually in our office that passed away of COVID while awaiting trial. Now, how horrible is that?
Sucks.
Let's say somebody was in there being accused of, dealing drugs to an undercover officer. We see those a lot, those charges. So he deserved the death sentence for a drug case? Really?
Yeah, that was an unintended consequence of what was going on, which was a whole other thing in and of itself. But yes, I agree with you. Your point is, as a matter of justice, hey, if you've committed some kind of nonviolent crime or just whatever, you're not sacrificing life, but only liberty. But in this case, these people, because of a sickness that was rampant, they couldn't control it. Probably the treatment in prison was terrible. Probably, right? You're not like, I don't think they're giving these people monoclonal antibodies and ivermectin all day. It's like they're like, just go to sleep, man. You should be good. You know what I mean? Like, dude,
Once it gets
I'm
really
coughing
bad,
blood.
then they're
Oh my
like,
God,
he's
I
not
can't breathe
moving.
at
Let's
all.
get him to.
That's more what I picture, and I think that's what it was. I mean, Claudia literally just said that some of her clients that she serves as a government, servant of the people, literally died while that was going on. So yes.
And again, this notion that those who are out on bail are reoffending and committing, violent acts or violent crimes, it's simply a scare tactic. Now, are there going to be individuals? Yeah, but they're outliers. It's not it's not the rule. It's a very tiny portion. The majority that are out on pretrial release are complying with the conditions of their pretrial release. I see it every day in courts. Like I said, it's not just, this year that I've been in this courtroom. This is 10 years.
How does somebody get on the radar as to whether they are complying or not? Do they have a caseworker or something?
They have a pretrial service. They report to pretrial services oftentimes, and they show up to court, and they don't pick up new cases. So again,
those were all the things I was wondering how they
you're going to have
are in touch with this
outliers. Okay, it's not a perfect system where 100% of the people who are out on pretrial release are not going to reoffend. You will have a couple that do, but if you have 99% not reoffending, then it is working. I mean, my clients, I'm in the felony trial division. So,
and just so we're clear with people too, was that an actual statistic, or is that just?
Oh no,
just
the 99.
So
No. I'm sorry. Let me just
observation. Your anecdotal observation. Yeah.
Here. I have the statistics here for electronic home monitoring, but there was a study that the vast majority who are out on pretrial release are not
electronic monitoring,
reoffending.
or both.
Well, that is pretrial release, but they're not.
But I'm just saying,
Right.
like, not every person who is free, depending on the nature, not every person who was accused of a crime who is then set free until further process in the court has to have an electronic monitoring bracelet on, right?
Well, we'll get into electronic monitoring, but the point I'm trying to make is I know that
I just wanna be clear about that.
certain journalists out there that love to be trolls. And, they say, oh, look at this guy. He was on bond for a gun case, and he went and he
Here's
committed...
an anecdotal case.
Right, he went
Like,
and
it's
committed this
everyone.
armed robbery.
It's rampant. Yeah.
So they love to take those outlier cases and stir it up. Okay, well, let's see. He was out on bond. All right, what's in his background? Oh, he doesn't have a violent background. So he just... This is his first arrest. He had a gun on him. Non-violent offense, right? His first arrest... He's let out, let's say, on an I bond, right, where he didn't have to pay any money, and then he goes and commits an armed robbery. Well, who in their right mind would have thought this would have happened? If the guy's never been arrested before, okay, and if especially the case that he is on bond for was a non-violent offense. So these certain journalists love to take these examples and not give you all the facts. They just say, man on bond for weapons offense commits, armed robbery or
Clickbait.
whatever.
Yep.
Right,
It's the clickbait.
exactly. That's
Get the
exactly
views.
what's being done. And again, there are outliers, just a very few outliers that are committing crimes while out on bail. The majority are complying with their pretrial release conditions, and they're showing up to court.
I just
Well,
want to
that's
put
good
in
news that they're complying and that part of the system is
Now
working.
we could get into electronic monitoring.
I
'cause
just
that's-
want to put in a caveat that kind of supports your point about the case-by-case basis for missing court hearings. And I'm not going to say the name of the guy, but back in law school, I
Was it Brian?
Right.
Don't,
It may or may not have been,
don't
no.
even arouse suspicion as to whether I'm guilty
it was
of something.
definitely not my boy here. But I
ride clean.
I will give an example, the cleanest. We had a client, okay, and that's why circumstantial, evidence based on, reasons for not appearing in court, I think is worth taking into consideration. Because I had a client that we represented in our pro bono legal clinic, and he missed his court date, right? And this was for it was a petty offense court, federal court for petty offense bullshit that they would cite veterans with who came into the Jesse Brown VA, and you came in with a backpack full of booze, or you had a little bag of weed on you, or citing you this, citing you that. So we'd represent these veterans in petty offense court, and so my client he just was not there, and I was like, oh man, this is not a good look. My client's not here. How am I gonna talk this over with the the ADA here? And I was just like, well, Mr. ADA, my client is a blind, homeless heroin addict, and he's probably literally could not find his way to the train today because he's blind and he's probably high on heroin. And your attempt to get any kind of a monetary fine from him is sort of folly, because you're never going to see this money because he has no money. He's literally probably passed out on a street bench somewhere right now. And he's like, yeah, sounds about right. All right, we're going to recommend we dismiss these fines or whatever. So yeah, he recommended we dismiss the fines. The judge was like, yeah, get this shit off my fucking plate. I don't even want to hear about this bullshit. Just done, next one. It's nothing, And
I'm going to take a quick break. You guys keep on going. And
Yeah.
I'll join right back in.
And so this guy comes up. So we get the fines dismissed, everything. They're like, all right, it's fine. It's not a big deal. This guy shows up 30 minutes later in the lobby. He's like, did I make it? I'm like, no, but don't worry about it. We got everything taken care of, man. Don't even worry about it. Just do you. But it's important because it's just without that context, you want to understand what a shit fucking situation this guy is in his life. And it's not like he missed his court date through any ill will of his own, or he's trying to shirk it. He legitimately tried to be there, but it's hard getting around when you literally cannot see. You're completely 100% blind. And stuff like that should be taken into account. Whereas someone who just looked at, oh, Mr. Corte, this guy's a piece of shit. It's well, this guy's got real problems. And that's not unique. A lot of people have serious issues, and there's compounding factors to that stuff that should be taken into consideration. So that's just my personal anecdotal experience with that. So I understand why they incorporated that into the legislation, because it's important sometimes.
Do you want to move on to electronic monitoring now?
Yeah, let's go to EM.
That's like our last
Go to
talking
EM.
point.
Yes.
Yeah,
So,
so I did want to hear about
famous
it
EM.
because you're explaining things and that we didn't know, and it's really cool to learn this new stuff about the process. And I know for somebody who does practice criminal law, or as whether it in the private sector or they're a state's attorney, like they know about it. This is their lingo. Like me and you, real estate, that's more my thing. The business transactional stuff. I'll rap about that all day. I sound like a master at.
Oh God!
Earlier on, I'm trying to focus. Like, what question do I want to ask her?
Yeah.
I don't even know. But I'm learning, and thank you for that. So yeah, so everything you've been talking about, electronic monitoring, I'm looking forward to hearing more about what gets you electronic monitoring, and when is it removed. And it's this goes along with house arrest, or are there people who are not on house arrest who are able to work and go about their lives, but they just have to wear an ankle bracelet so they don't flee? Or when you're on electronic monitoring, you're locked into the house. This is house arrest, basically. So those are the things that I want to learn, and I guess you could go.
There's more leeway with this new provision.
So electronic home monitoring, or EM, or house arrest, however you want to call it, I think what's going to happen is that we're going to see a lot more individuals placed on EM, because after the judge, weighs everything, they'll probably determine, okay, you know what, I don't want to deny this guy bail, but I also don't want him to just go free without any conditions, so I'm going to put him on EM. I think at least we're going to see an increase of people on EM. Now, again, that's not necessarily a bad thing. So what is EM? So it is an ankle bracelet. You have to charge it. Okay, it's not the sexiest thing to wear on your ankle.
So it's got like a USB port.
It's not something you want to wear on a date.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, you have
on a
to
Tinder
charge
date, you want to
it.
hide that shit.
And then, are you attached to the charger? Like, is it a corded one? Does it have a
USB
iPhone one that you just touch it to it and it charges it, or like
wireless charging? Just put your leg up on the wireless
You're like,
charger.
hey man, I would love to get into work on time this morning, but dude, I am charging this EM bracelet
it's
right now.
taking forever.
Or EM bracelet. EM
I don't want it to go
anklet.
dead. I'll have the cops here in no time.
So yes, you have to charge it. But before we move on, how do you charge it? What kind of, is it just like a USB cord?
To be honest, I've never seen the actual charger. I mean, I've never actually inspected an EM bracelet. I mean, I don't get down and look at.
I didn't know you had to maintain it. What I thought it would be is they put a battery in there. It's supposed to last 7 months, and then they got to go in every few months to replace it. Make sure it's all good.
It's more like a cell phone.
If they're responsible for charging
it.
So what happens? Are these people sweating all the time the battery gets low? Like, most motherfuckers sweat about when their phone battery gets low. But if that starts getting low and they find out, we're going to trace the location of that fucking EM bracelet because this guy's off the radar. Like, the fucking battery's gone. It's got a chip in there like a fucking puppy dog where they can tell. What the fuck? But that's what I'm wondering. If you could find out, please, obviously, if we remain without this answer, if Matt, if maybe at the end or even right now, you could try to find out how they charge them. And if not, if we don't find out now, I would like Claudia to let me know later if she can talk to somebody within her office or on the state's on the prosecution side or one of the clients. Like, hey man, have you ever been on EM before?
So I could tell you right now,
how do you charge those ankle?
My clients that I have currently on EM, they're showing up to court.
Yeah.
There's hasn't been any issues. Have there been issues with clients? Like, I obviously I don't represent every single client in our office, but have there been issues in the past? Oh, I'm sure, but the vast majority are showing up. So here are some studies that they are citing. A Loyola University Chicago study showed that bail reform in Cook County has not been associated with increases in new criminal activity. An analysis by the Chicago Appleseed Center for Fair Courts showed that less than 4% of people on electronic monitoring in Cook County between 2016 and 2020 were rearrested on accusations of a new serious crime. So less than 4%. Okay, again, in a perfect utopia, it would be 0% rearrested.
But less than 4 is low.
Less than 4% for Cook County. That's significant.
Run the first statistic by me again one more time. The one you mentioned right before that.
I'll get to another
because we're
one.
drained, it's hard for me to retain details. But this one
Loyola?
you just said was that less than 4% of people that are on electronic monitoring were arrested again on another offense. So it shows, or it would suggest, that people are taking this seriously and they're not going out to commit another crime because they know that they're already facing jeopardy on a first charge.
And then a study by the University of Chicago Crime Lab using recent data showed that arrests for individuals on electronic home monitoring have remained flat and low despite vast fluctuations in the amount of gun homicides over the last few years.
Well, you just said
indicating that those on electronic monitoring are not driving the crime.
So they remain flat at 4% because I thought maybe I'm trying not to confuse the details of
No,
the
no,
stats
you're
here,
confusing
but 4%
it.
don't commit another crime, and that number has remained flat because what she's saying is that the offense rate.
No, you're misunderstanding.
That's what I'm trying to clear up.
4% of the
I'm just trying to
baddies,
clear
right?
up.
4% of the baddies who do
yes.
fuck up.
This is a different study showing that arrests for individuals on electronic home monitoring have remained essentially the same over the years, despite the increase in the homicides, the gun homicides, over what we've seen the past few years. So again, electronic
so the people
home
that
monitoring.
have electronic monitoring are not the ones out there doing
It had
these
nothing
crimes.
to do with it. More people on electronic home monitoring have nothing to do with the increase in the gun violence in the city. That's the point that the study.
That's why you're saying this is a fair way of instead of incarcerating somebody that they can just be on electronic monitoring.
Right.
And although
Doesn't pose
it's probably
societal
really
risk.
embarrassing to walk into work with your damn electronic monitoring.
Wear sweatpants, bro, right? You know?
Well, that brings me to my
If
second
they fit
point.
in your dress code uniform, Menards might be able to tell
Brian,
you.
you can't go to. So electronic home monitoring is house arrest. You cannot leave your house. Now, hold on.
That was one
You
thing
get
I brought
work
up
and
earlier.
school movement,
is there a
don't you?
work exception?
Yeah.
So if you have
'Cause people gotta make a living.
documentation that you are gainfully employed, of course the sheriff has to verify you definitely are employed at said location, then the judge needs to approve of a court order allowing you movement. Let's say you work Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. Okay, well, you will have movement Monday through Friday, 8 to 6, if for an hour commute between. It has to be approved by the judge, and it has to be verified by the sheriff. With the new Pretrial Fairness Act, there's 2 days of the week given to those on electronic home monitoring for essential movement. What is essential movement? So essential movement, and this is not for work, because the work you would get you could get work approval to move, right? But essential movement, grocery shopping, doctor visits, any sort of errands that you have to run. So you get 2 days. You're allowed movement for a certain period of time. It's not 24 hours the whole day. You're allowed a certain amount of a period on those 2 days. And
Court has to order it.
No. The statute now gave this right. So
this part of the statute now you have
now
a
you
certain
get
amount of
2
time.
days.
2 days.
That's already gone into effect over this.
So you have 2 days for essential movement. Yes, because we heard about this before, and it's like this is a COVID thing. Essential workers, essential movement.
No.
Like, you know what I mean? It sounded similar.
Is that kind of like? But what exactly does essential movement entail, and how do they categorize what is essential movement versus not?
Going
Like,
to
how do
the
they
movie
track
theater
that?
is not essential movement. Going to your friend's house is not essential movement. Going and hanging out on the street, and if you're on a corner and you're there for 2 hours on a corner, that's not essential
Is
movement.
the bracelet
it's
only
GPS
or the bracelet,
tracked.
the anklet, whatever the anklet is the okay. That's what I was going to
It's
say.
GPS
yes, she already
tracked.
know what I want to ask because I want to ask is like,
Yes.
is it a proximity thing to the home?
Right.
Is it a time standard or is
I guess
it
it's both.
location standard? So if they see you're sitting over at AMC watching a new friggin'
So it
Batman
depends
or
on what
something
you
like-
do, right?
You can't go watch a Bulls game at the United Center. That's
That'd
not
be
essential
hysterical.
movement.
Be like, I couldn't even get tickets to that game, and this son of a bitch is there right now, according to this electronic monitoring game.
Because
bracelet.
it's like how do they know where the fuck you're going is essential? Is that pre-established? Like, because 48 hours, you can do a lot in 48 hours. Be like, oh yeah, that was essential movement. I was just going over to my ex's place to pick
Right,
up some
no.
stuff.
It doesn't. Hold on, just to clarify, you don't get 48
Yeah.
hours of movement. You get 2 days of movement, and there's a certain time period. It's not 48
Yeah,
hours.
you get
of
like a
complete
9 to
movement.
5. Yeah,
No,
like you're not going out to
it's
turn up.
spread out
this evening.
over a
2
period
days.
of.
2 days.
But
And at
I'm
least
just saying
two
you can do a
different-
lot
two different days.
in those 2 days. You can go a lot of places.
Right. So they are. So the point is they are being tracked the entire time.
So they have a list of essential places, or where you can
No.
go on your
Again,
social movement?
essential movement, groceries shopping, Medical
Yes.
appointments.
Okay.
It's clearly
Anything
defined.
not
Clearly
going
defined.
to a Bulls game. That is
Right.
not going to
Clearly
be
defined.
essential movement.
And
It
that would be
will
considered a
show up.
violation if you're getting pulled in because you
You
went to the
would,
Bulls game.
because you're not
Yeah, yeah.
supposed. The Bulls game's not essential movement unless you work at the United Center and you have court
Right.
order to go there, right?
Right.
That's a different story. But to go watch a game, no, that would be a violation.
Okay, so yeah, we have a list of places that would be considered
Okay.
essential movement. Grocery store. Read those one more time because we're all involved in this passionate conversation.
Well, again, it's not an exhaustive list. It's just an example.
Yeah,
Like
so
going
the
to the
example.
grocery store, going to the doctor,
Yeah.
running
Family?
clothes shopping.
to visit your mom or dad or family or your kids or something.
I mean, again, that would depend. Like, is that essential? Maybe to go pick up your child if you share custody.
So they list what are essential, or these
There's
were
not
just
an
examples.
exhaustive
of,
list.
yeah, there's
These are
not
just
not an
examples.
exhaustive list. These are just things
Right.
that and then who makes the determination of what's going to be included in their essential movement as part of the court order with the judge.
No, it's not.
Like for you, essential movement, you're telling me you have to pick up your kid at this time. Then they say, yeah, that's essential movement.
Again, it could be to go for job interview, right?
But the judge makes that determination. Who makes the determination of whether that's essential?
the sheriff will see where they're going. Okay,
Well,
so if they're
who sets the standard as to
there's
those
no
items
so
for
Brian,
that particular
listen,
person?
there's no list right now. What I'm trying to
Yeah.
say is the statute says essential movement. That's what it's called. You have
gonna
2
have to be
days
figured out,
of
I guess.
essential movement. So if let's
I'm just
say
wondering if there was a clear definition
No,
that the judge,
there's
or
not.
that the
There's
judge
not.
gets to
So-
make the determination, like for a given person, picking up the kid might be essential, but for another person, if there's
Right.
the crime is related to
Case
kids, then
by
that's not going to be
case.
Right.
essential.
Determined.
yeah,
by the
like
judge.
That's not gonna
taking
be
your
essential
children to
movement.
school. Okay, let's say that could be an example. Grocery shopping, medical appointments. Okay,
Yeah, I
what's
get it.
not
Those
an
are nice and
example?
simple.
Going to the movies.
But I'm just
So-
wondering, like, how that interacts with the caseworker. Like, we see, these are your defined, because I'm just wondering, like, they set out, okay, or is it just so loose that it's like, yeah, later on if you got in trouble, they have to later decide after
Yeah.
you've offended what was acceptable.
Maybe
That's what I'm trying to figure out. The
maybe.
order
Like,
of
I
operations.
was going to the
here.
grocery store. I also stopped at my ex's house to
And
slap
the Bulls
around a few
game.
Oh
times.
my
or
god,
whatever.
no,
Like on the
stop.
way, I'm just seeing these scenarios play out. Maybe.
Well, yeah,
like,
because then they can say, well, that part was essential and that wasn't. So what happens now? You're violating. You know what I mean?
I don't need- yeah.
It seems like it leaves too much leeway to be found guilty of something after the fact. I just thought that maybe the judge would be like, okay, you say you're a working father or whatever. Like this is one of the ones we're include with you. This is one or not. I understand also the peril of just driving down the street and your car breaking down and now you're in a place where you weren't supposed to be or something. Like
right, you could get screwed.
And the thing that
you don't
I
have
want
time, maybe.
everybody to
So-
know about this is that the criminal justice system isn't perfect. It's just the system we have, but we're talking about things that better in the justice
and
system.
I can tell you right now, I haven't had any issues with these essential movements. And I have clients on electronic monitoring. They're taking advantage of the essential movement days, and there's been no issues. So when something comes up, maybe I'll tell you, but I can't really say like how that would look because it hasn't come up yet. Another thing with the electronic movement that this law now changes is that an individual, people are asking, how come individuals cannot be picked up for 48 hours after there is electronic monitoring violation? So basically it'll send a signal. So if you leave the address where you're on electronic home monitoring, it'll leave a signal. Send a signal to the sheriffs. And oftentimes what they would do is then they would go to that location and they would arrest the individual on the electronic home monitoring for any reason. So what have we seen? We've seen people stepping outside to throw out the trash getting arrested.
Yeah.
We've seen people that the battery died or the
We don't
charger.
want
like
unreasonable
immediately
arrest.
they're on their ass.
Right.
We don't want unreasonable
We don't want
arrest.
that.
But there has been. That's the point I'm trying to make. There's been glitches.
Has it been large scale or small scale?
No, it's actually been large scale where there's very technical violations of electronic home monitoring, and then they are picked up and they're arrested and they're charged with escape. That is a very serious crime. Escape. It's
And
felony.
Are there one driver or more than one driver of that? Is it the police want this person away? Is it the state's attorney wants them away?
What do you mean?
I think
Because
it's
if
just
they're
a-
making arrests,
Yeah.
if they're making arrests that are arbitrary because you're going out to the fucking garbage to throw out your trash, are they targeting specific individuals on a large scale level?
Well, I
Or
think it's
what's
just easier to
happening?
do so. It's just an easy fucking notch in the belt. It's like, oh, look at you, this asshole tried to escape.
No,
or whatever.
if you step out of right now, how the law is, you leave that residence, you go in your alley, right?
Yeah.
You're in your alley, you're outside, That's a violation. You could be charged with escape. Now, the new law, what they're saying is you cannot charge someone with felony escape unless they are accused of being in violation of more than 48 hours. Now, let's clarify, because what are a lot of people saying? Oh, in 48 hours, you could be in Texas.
Well, that's what
right?
Matt was saying. Right?
No, that's
There's a lot of places you can go in 48 hours.
Right. But here's the point. Let's say that they go outside in the alley, okay? Yeah. Now that the thing goes off, the sheriffs could show up at any time, by the way. Just so we clarify, this law does not say, nope, sheriffs, you cannot show up for another 48 hours. The law is saying you can't be charged with escape unless you've been missing for 48 hours, okay? So now they got the location. They show up. Oh, this guy was just in the alley, okay? Yeah. So there's no arrest being made right now. Now, if this guy went on this whole rendezvous, because again, GPS track, and we see that this guy went to place A, B, C, or D, now that's a different story, okay? But even so, it has to be 48 hours until somebody is charged with a felony escape.
That seems like a while for me. I feel like you can make that determination within 12
hours. The GPS shows that they're clearly escaping or something, right? Like you said, their GPS monitor. If you see that this guy is traveling, he's now in flight to Texas. Yeah. And in that, like, you see the location GPS monitor, they now find he's in Texas. My expectation would be that this person can be extradited their ass back to Illinois to, and maybe face some charges in Texas too or something.
So wait, just to clarify again, if the guy, let's say he leaves his house, okay? So he's on electronic home monitoring at his house. Let's say he goes out in the alley, and not only does he go out in the alley, he gets in a car and he leaves. Well, guess what? Again, GPS tracked. The sheriff can go to the GPS location, take him into custody for violating the terms of EM, okay? So now he's in custody because he couldn't comply with the terms. However, he can't be charged with a new felony offense of escape. So does that make sense? So he will be taken into custody. All right. It's not like, does that make sense?
Yeah.
So maybe I didn't explain it good before because I think
we're just trying to flush it all out.
Right. I think the way I explained it was I made it seem like if they could be gone for 47 hours and so long as they come back at the 48th hour, we're all good. That's not the case. The sheriffs may pick up the defendants and bring them to the county jail, and then he'll have to go in front of the judge and explain why it is he violated the terms of electronic home monitoring, but he can't be charged with escape unless it's been more than 48 hours. And this helps solve our issue.
It gives a more clear standard. So what we're trying to do is eliminate unfair and unjust, charges of escape or the punishments that come along with that. But as a safety mechanism, we still have GPS tracking on these individuals. So, if there was a real escape, there's still that kind of safeguard there that, we know exactly where this person's at as well.
Yeah.
Assuming that there's no problems with the monitoring or
and
that they can't
I've seen people arrested for
remove
escape by simply being in their house and there was some issue with their device. It wasn't charged and too bad. You're in your house where you're supposed to be. We're still charging you with felony escape. That has happened. And that's a problem.
Well, because what it seems is that that this law is trying to make a shift from an ultra strict policy of house arrest, where it's like, dude, you leave that fucking front door and
go on the sidewalk. You're fucked.
The sheriff will you will be found using GPS tracking technology, your bracelet, and the sheriff is going to be taking you in just for leaving the house.
Right
now.
But not charged with
depending
felony
on the
escape,
severity or flight risk of an individual, I think those would be the factors, or severity of crime accused of, and potential flight risk being assessed, as close to accurately as possible. That would depend on the strictness of, whether they're allowed to leave the house or not. But yes, there's two different things. So. Escape would be anything after 48 hours. If you have not, then you can now be charged with escape. So, but they can still arrest you for leaving your home, even if it has been within that 40-hour period.
Well, don't use the word arrest because Arrest makes it seem like it's a new offense. They can take you into custody is more
Okay,
like it for
good clarification,
violating
yes.
it. But it's not a new charge. You're
Yeah.
just like, so when you're
Taken
placed
into
on
custody
EM.
for violation of the terms of what
Right.
you were doing. Yes.
So
Okay,
when you're
okay.
placed on on electronic home monitoring, you have you sign a paper agreeing to the terms of electronic home monitoring. You violate any of those terms, what's the alternative? Cook County Jail.
Yeah.
So you can't follow the rules? Okay, fine. Cook County Jail. So that it's not a new charge. It's just that okay, you don't want to follow the rules.
But
you can
escape,
wait.
but escape after
Escape
48
is
hours
different.
is a new
Yes.
charge.
That's a
Not only
felony,
did you
a
do
serious
this, or
felony
that
offense.
you're
I gotcha.
accused of doing this shit.
Yeah.
And I'm just talking in loose terms here. I'm not trying to
Right.
presume people are guilty or something. I'm like, but you're doing this shit, and then you also escape. Now you have 2 charges, so you're gonna get sentenced on, agbat. That's what they call it, aggravated battery, and freaking
Yeah.
like agbat. Who's got an agbat here? So
Yeah.
an agbat. And this is all these little acronyms that people use within the industry. Aggravated battery.
Yeah.
And then you also have an escape now too. So
Right.
now you're facing charges. You might be doing 25 years on the agbat, and then you're doing another, or well, maybe
Not 25
She
years,
looked at me. She's like, they don't get that long, and people are like, they're letting him out
25.
sooner. Did he bash somebody's head in with a Louisville Slugger? Like Easy, that's a little Easy reference there. But yeah, it's like you're getting a lot of years, right? So let's say the person gets 10, 15 years or something, or 12 years on a pretty, or whatever, 20, however severe it is, and then they could face another 5 to 10 years for an escape or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean,
But how long do people usually get on an escape? Have you seen people for their sentencing on an escape? And I wonder if the judges, because they have a lot of discretion, I don't know, depending on how the law is written, they may have judicial discretion in that sentencing, right?
No, they don't. There's
So
no judicial.
There's just guidelines.
Right,
Okay.
there's just
We're
guidelines.
learning a lot here tonight.
Right, there's just guidelines. And again, it depends on their background for the sentencing ranges, so I don't want to get into that.
Yeah.
But yeah, the point is that, we do see these very technical violations and they get charged with it. So, I just wanted to clear up that narrative that it's not like, oh no, the sheriffs can't do anything for 48 hours. No, absolutely not. They can go immediately that there's a signal sent to their,
That's good. I
That's
think
good.
that
That's
makes
good.
sense.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah.
All right. We people know that. Just know that they can still take someone into custody if they're violating their terms. So don't freak out like they're just letting the criminals go, or they
Cool
get
your jets,
they get
people.
treated with baby hands. They're just getting treated so gently that the criminals are getting away with everything. You're trying to point out the point that is not necessarily the case.
Right. So again, I feel like the Pretrial Fairness Act has been attacked. Say that fast, right? The Pretrial Fairness Act has been attacked unfairly because it's been pieced apart and just portrayed in a way to instill fear and not necessarily explain. So my hopes is that whoever listens to this podcast, that they get a new understanding of what exactly is the Illinois Pretrial Fairness Act, and they have their facts straight. So they can't say, oh, well, you're charged with robbery. Oh, wow, everyone's going to be let out of Cook County Jail come January 1st. No. Okay.
Don't be scared into thinking that's the case.
Right. You will have those people who, no matter what the facts are, they will still believe bond is supposed to be punishment, and you can't change their mind. That's their way of thinking.
Yeah, some people have an opinion
They
that
think
as a
it's
matter of
punishment.
policy,
Right.
bond is punishment. But your point is just that no, that's not the purpose
And what
of
I
it, or
say
it should
to
not
them,
be the purpose of
what
it.
I say to them is, you better pray to God you're never in the wrong place at the wrong time. You really should, because they like to say, oh, well, these are repeat offenders. These are they say all these kinds of nasty things until it's someone who's never been arrested standing in front of the judge. You won't really know how it feels, right? Unless you're in the wrong place at the wrong time. And like I said, my that client that I had, what happened to him? He married the wrong woman with a troubled past, with very, very troubled kids. Wrong marriage, wrong time, right? Now, obviously, they're divorced. It's out of your life, but it was a very important lesson to him. A very important lesson. You could be in the wrong place at the wrong time. You could be with the wrong partner.
Don't I know it?
Right? The wrong friends. Really, what is a crime we see a lot? Drunk driving, right? DUIs, aggravated DUI.
Because you don't have to be a violent criminal to do that.
Exactly. And a lot of attorneys
There's
have been
two things that
charged
are legal.
with that.
Driving is legal, drinking is legal. Combine the two, they're not legal.
That's illegal.
And there's it doesn't matter. There's been so many people that do get charged with that or accused of it.
Right. And until you're in that
doesn't mean
position,
that you're a malicious person. You're an idiot, or you got drunk that night and you fucking drove, or whatever the case may
right.
be.
Now, can you imagine the scenario where somebody got drunk and drove and killed someone? They never were arrested before. They're a good, hardworking professional, but they made a terrible decision that night to
Alcohol
drink
ruins
and drive.
lives, man.
Right.
It's that simple.
But again, that's what sentencing is for,
you know, it's
not
funny-
pretrial release.
It's funny, like, what substances do to people, and although, intoxication is not a defense, it's still, like, doesn't help either. Like, if you're intoxicated, how many people they're intoxicated would
You
never
get a
do
lot
the shit
dumber.
they did when they're hammered or something
Yeah.
drunk? They're not even the same person.
No.
They can't even talk to make sense. They don't
get a
they don't
lot
remember
dumber.
what they're saying. They're like,
People's personalities
it's like
change,
it's like
too.
literally
Yeah.
what I see from people who are really, really drunk is that their will has been substituted. It's literally almost like the alcohol itself is talking. Like they're
The
talking
demon-
gibberish.
the demon
they say
compels
stupid
you.
shit.
Yeah,
that they,
it's
like,
terrible.
they're like, I didn't even want to say that in this situation, but it's flowing out of my mouth or something. Like I've seen that. It's weird.
Right.
Yes, very
Or
much so.
let's pretend Brian, you're at at a festival or something, and you're out with friends, and one of your friends says, "Hey, I got to go to the bathroom real quick. You mind holding my purse, my backpack?" And you're like, "Yeah, sure." You don't think twice about it. You're holding it, and next thing you know, a police officer comes up to you and is like, "Hey, can I see that backpack?" You give it to him. He searches it. There's a firearm inside. You're going in. Let the courts hash it out because you got to prove knowledge. You knew that the firearm was in there, but that's a different story. But the point is, you're arrested.
And you didn't know your friend.
Right.
Had a gun in the bag or
Right.
whatever.
So that's what I'm saying. Wrong place, wrong time, wrong friends, wrong partner. It's all very real. And I feel like a lot of people that are being so judgmental and harsh,
They've been lucky so far.
have been
It hasn't
lucky
been
so far.
in that situation
Yes,
themselves.
They've been lucky
Yeah.
so far. But two, also, you got to look at the whole approach. Again, those that are guilty will have their, they will have their day in court. And if they truly are guilty, they will have their sentence they have to serve. There's punishment, so to speak, okay? But that is not appropriate at the bond stage, because I think it's fair to say that every single one of us, if we were arrested and we were, whether innocent or guilty, we would still want our day in court to prove for the state's attorney to prove the charges against us beyond a reasonable doubt, no matter what. And I think that's pretty safe to say. I don't think anyone here would say, "Oh, well, if I didn't do a crime, I'm okay with the judge setting $1 million bond for, let's say, a heinous crime that I'm accused of, but I really didn't do." No, who would say that? Nobody would say that, right? So you really don't know until it happens to you, and that would be very unfortunate, right? So this is
And
meant.
you're a believer in procedural safeguards to avoid injustice in our system.
Right. This is a procedural safeguard. It is fair. It makes it really takes into account the safety. It really does. Right now, we're not taking into account safety. We're taking into account dollar signs.
And I want people to know something if you're listening to this too. Some people might say, "Oh, you're a liberal public defender," and right away she shook her head. I thought she might, she laughed a little bit. I expected that.
Those who know me, I'm not going to get into politics, but those who know me know me.
we don't have to mention any politicians,
Right.
but I would tell the listeners out there, maybe Claudia is a public defender, and usually people have a preconceived notion that you're just some like liberal social worker, justice warrior person that's like trying to free criminals. Like, I'm going to tell people out there, Claudia is a conservative, as I know her. She has conservative values. And so just so everybody knows out there, don't assume that this is like your liberal bleeding heart person here who's trying to get off a bunch of violent criminals or whatever off of offenses. She herself is conservative, but she has probably experienced injustices with the system. You've heard a couple of examples of what she believes it has been those injustices, and she's working to try to make things better and to, best serve her clients. And that's what we as attorneys, our job is to do. So, they're all necessary parts of the system that we have. Is there anything else that you want to tell people about the Pretrial Fairness Act? We ended there on electronic monitoring. We covered very in depth. Some of the first parts of that. Is there
Right.
anything else you want to mention?
So
to people
I can
about that?
actually email you a fact and fiction sheet, and maybe you can post it, like as I don't know if you could post it as an attachment, or you could post it maybe on your Facebook, or send it out with an email as an attachment.
Sometimes you can put stuff in comments. I don't know if they allow you to put.
No,
you
no.
can put a link probably
So
to the document.
it's like,
you can put a link in there to it.
It's a
where people can
one-page
find it.
fact and fiction. It sums up some of the main ideas, like, okay, false, blah, 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 fact, and then I'll list it. So this, I think, will be very helpful, because it's what page? It's the it's the Pretrial Fairness Act in a nutshell.
Yeah.
So I think it'll be very helpful for your viewers. So I will email that to you. I'm allowed to share that, and
yeah.
you can share it with them.
And that's produced by your office.
Yes.
But and in what
We're allowed to share this. It's a one-page. Yes.
You can read it and make up your mind for yourself. They're trying to just point out what they perceive to be truths and falsehoods about the law, and to try to give you a little bit more clarity on their stance in these times where there's a lot of political advertising going on telling you to hate this law right away, or that it's bad, that you're pointing out things that are good about it, or just outright fact and fiction.
Well,
so
no,
we get it.
right. It's not their stance on the law. It is the law.
Well, yeah, yes.
So,
I'm
again,
just trying to
right.
put this in context for people who are listening who don't have experience with it. But a lot of the people, I think the people who listen to this will have experience with criminal law, and a lot of maybe your colleagues and coworkers will listen to it. And I'd be like, I feel bad as a lawyer. I'm like, I wish I knew more about this, right? Because we're kind of outsiders looking in. They know that there's a language to each profession, to each type of law. I don't know that as well, so I'm doing a lot of learning here tonight. And so what I'm just trying to flush things out, that like I'm almost like a lay person in certain regards, in the sense that I took criminal law. I applied it on the bar exam when I had to, and now that I'm focusing on some things, other things have been fading in from my mind. And so there is no teacher like the real world experience that Claudia has. So even if I remembered a lot of the details, how these things play out in real life is totally different. And experience creates predictability. So a lot of times Claudia probably assesses in the beginning and already knows what she's going to be dealing with or what the response might be. And you see that all the time in this business too, when I start asking questions, because I know what the predictable fact patterns are that I see recurring. So besides electronic monitoring?
Honestly, I encourage people to, I believe bond court at 26 in California, felony bond court. It's every day at 12 o'clock. I'm pretty sure they're still on Zoom. So it's a public proceeding. Anyone can view this. I believe it's either still on Zoom or they have like a YouTube link, or in any event, you could always go in person and view how bond court really is, so you can see it firsthand. And like, I really feel like those who are shouting their opinions should first go view how bond court actually does work, to see, because there's a lot that goes into it. And especially when someone has held no bail, there's a careful analysis, and even more so January 1st, you're going to have even more in-depth analysis. But I really encourage people to educate themselves. Again, we can have our opinions as attorneys, but I think the point of tonight was actually to get the facts out. And I know we gave a bit of our opinion, but the main thing was we got the facts out of this is what the law is.
It's a complex subject, and it is serious. Right. And we tried to, add in some humor there to lighten it up for people listening out there.
Yeah,
Right.
if we got it, there's other stuff we gotta do. That could be a whole nother podcast, like the requirements for police specifically and stuff. That's a whole nother.
We may
bailiwick.
actually end up doing one.
But I just don't think we have time tonight.
Yeah, well, no, we don't.
Yeah.
We not
There's
only do we not
a
have
lot
time,
we
but I
gotta
think
do.
Claudia did want to just focus mainly on the
Pretrial Fairness Act. Yeah, just because there's so much to it.
See, and that's another thing. Like, we're so busy with work. Like, I wanted to prepare for this a lot more. Like, I spoke with my brother, who's a highly intelligent individual. And he's like, before you go on that podcast, he's like, you probably want to do research. Now, Matt is very adept and sharp at getting doing research and just quickly making sense of the general situation, summing it up, and we, like, he was telling me certain things about this law, so we just, although we focused on what is a big important piece of it, there's a lot of other things in this law, so that hasn't been covered tonight. But Claudia, in her area of practice, is pointing out the things about the ones that she deals with the most on a day-to-day basis. So how this will affect police officers, and how, whether this is constitutional or separate topics. You're just saying, like, in my line of work, if I'm defending the public as a public defender, these are the things that are now going to be in place in the new year. And don't don't allow people to scare you into thinking that this could be worse than it is. Of course, you'll have to make up your own minds and do your own research to try to confirm what we're saying, what we've discussed here this evening, and that's what you should do.
And those who are currently being held, let's say in Cook County Jail for kidnapping, robbery, a second-degree murder, again, they will not be let out on January 1st. There would have to be a hearing to determine if, in fact, they should remain detained, or if electronic home monitoring would be more appropriate, or just released without conditions. Again, it would have to be a full hearing on that. It's not like, okay, robbery, you're out on January 1st. That's not going to happen at all.
Do defendants or accused, do they have to file a motion to
their attorney
to get a hearing? Their attorney has to file a motion,
notice.
so it's not like everybody's automatically getting a hearing.
And keep in mind, this is actually going to happen over the next few months because there's so many. It's not all going to happen on January 1st. Slowly, we're working up to that, so that come January 1st, presumably those who should be incarcerated pending trial will be. And those who shouldn't be, because they're not a danger to society and they're not a flight risk whatsoever, will either be on electronic home monitoring or they released without conditions and, showing up to court. But again, it's a very high standard that has to be met for them to be released. For them to be detained for the non-detainable offenses. You can't just say we're going to detain them because they cannot afford to pay X amount of money that we originally said. And also, for more information on the Pretrial Fairness Act, your viewers can go to pretrialfairness.org, and you'll find out a whole bunch of more information, and I'll send you this flyer. And thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for joining us. I will thank you again probably before we fully sign off. Just a few things that I wanted to mention and cover before we fully sign off. But yes, thank you very much for sharing your knowledge and for being organized to discuss this tonight. And I look forward to hearing it back. And each one of these podcasts is a learning experience for me too, because we were talking about printing out some of this information so that we had it in front of us. And I was like, well, we already have... In the background here, we have our printers covered because they look visually distracting. So you can see over there with the justice scales on top of it.
The mound of blue.
We have these, and because it's the Blue Podcast, Blessed Life University, you got the navy colors. I keep it nice and dark and navy. I love the color. It's a beautiful color, so it covers up our printers from being a distraction back there. So they ask, do you want to print this stuff? So I couldn't even organize my comments and thoughts. I'm like, if I had that defined bullet point list in front of me, I'd have been more easily able to stay on topic. But I did want to ask questions for the clarification of listeners, because if I'm an attorney and went to law school, if you have not, we're talking about a very complex system that moves lightning quick some of these days. I mean, in a given morning or afternoon, most of your bond hearings in the morning?
I am not in bond court. I am assigned a felony trial room.
You said felony trial room.
But no, felony bond court is at noon every day at, what room is it? Why am I blanking on the room? It's on the first floor in 26th Street. So bond court's every day. But for me, for example, let's say, I have a client in custody for possession of a controlled substance. Okay. He had, cocaine on him. All right, well, now it's up to me as his attorney to bring in a motion to review bond in front of the judge. Judge, he doesn't have, the $1,000 to get out of custody. It's a nonviolent offense, right? He is not a flight risk. He's shown up to court before. And he's also not a danger to society. He's got no violence whatsoever in his background. We can't find that he's a danger to society if he has no violence and he's, 52 years old or whatever. So that would be up to me now as his attorney representing him throughout his case to bring that. But the individuals that are arrested, first time, they're arrested, that's the beginning stage. There are specific attorneys from my office that only do the bond hearings.
That was going to be my follow-up question, because you are assigned to the felony trial division, so you do take over a case when they are now moving forward into the trial. But,
I litigate, I should say.
Yeah, so it's a division of labor. You have, and as far as the whole criminal process playing out from the time that you are arrested
and then brought in for a bond hearing, which is how soon after arrest again, or is there a strict timeline for that?
48 hours.
So within 48 hours, you have to get a bond hearing. Somebody else at the public defender's office is taking it on because they specialize in it. Maybe that's an entry-level thing. I don't know. Depending on how complicated it is. It sounded like it was a quick, fast-paced thing before. If you're only getting 5 minutes in there, you're in and out. They stamp the thing, the clerk puts it in the file, and you're out. And then the attorneys are exchanging copies for their records. She can add it, or the attorney can add it into her file. So you're in a different division. The labor is divided so that there's somebody else doing that. The one thing that I wanted to ask you, though, as a public defender then in the felony trial division, how many cases would you hear, or how many clients would you be representing in a given day at these hearings or when the court dates are on?
Right now, I can tell you, I have...
Or your total client load right now.
I have
or
less
caseload.
than... I want to say on the top of my head, I definitely have less than 10 people in custody. The majority of my clients are out of custody. They've been in compliance. They're showing up to court. They're complying with everything, but I have less than 10 in custody right
What's
now.
your total client load? The reason I'm asking is I wanted to see if folks may be overworked. Like when we so and the reason I mention that is, did you ever watch the Chapelle show?
Yeah. I don't know if I'm at liberty. I wouldn't say I'm overworked right now, but I don't know if I'm at liberty to say how many cases I have.
Okay, yeah,
don't
don't
okay.
do anything to make you
Yeah.
show your job. That's not the point of this. I'm not trying to pull that out of people.
Yeah.
So yeah, if you're
You're
not
thinking
if you
about the
don't feel-
Chapelle skit with the.
Well,
I
I'm
know
going
which
to
one
mention
you're
this in
thinking
a
about.
second. We'll get to that. But so you kind of already know where I'm going. But the reason I asked is just, I guess, because what Matt was saying is, and yeah, if you're not at liberty to say, then don't give me exact details. But and then you have your personal feelings. You might not even want to share those because of what your colleagues or your superiors might see. And we're not trying to get them in trouble here. So the Chapelle skit was a joke, and it was like, what if the justice system was reversed between rich and poor? So it kind of hints at things that we discussed earlier. To like, what if the white collar criminals got treated the way we all got treated? So when they show the white collar criminal and the tables had been turned where they're treating like drug dealers really nice, but they're treating the white collar criminal like shit. It was hysterical the way they did it. It was so well done. It was
Yeah,
It was
like-
a great. It was,
like
it was a
the
perfect skit.
I gotta
about-
look this up. Yeah.
Like the feds raid this white collar criminal, like some stockbroker's home, and they're kick down the door in the bedroom. They arrest the wife. They throw her down to the ground. They shoot the dog. Like just all.
You're like, shut that dog up, and somebody
Shut
just
that
pops the
goddamn
dog.
dog up. I was like, oh my
Yeah,
god,
it's-
my dog.
It's a joke, of course.
But it's just to the nth degree showing, just the, the complete 180 of
Well,
how.
the thing I wanted to mention about
they-
the public
yeah.
defender is that his assigned attorney from whoever's, if it was federal, whatever, if they have a federal public defender's office, the guy walks in, he's like, sorry, mate. He's like, you're like my 40th case this week or today or whatever.
Yeah,
he
yeah.
said something like that. I think he said this week. He's like,
just
"You're
all
like my 40th
stressed out,
case this
hair all
week."
frazzled,
Yeah,
big
he's like,
binder, all disheveled. Like,
and then he goes,
oh god, I have like 5
did
minutes
somebody
to
piss
talk
in
to you.
here?
Yeah.
He's like, it smells like piss. And the guy goes, it was me. So the white collar criminal is now afraid to be in the, you know what I mean? Because they were like interrogating the shit out of him before the attorney came in. And so I just was wondering, you can't say, but I thought it was funny because I was wondering, are the people we're depending on to serve us, taking on too high of caseloads? That's another issue in and of itself.
We don't need an affirmative answer.
I think
It's okay.
I think I do my job very well.
Yeah.
I have a winning track record. I haven't lost a case yet in the felony trial division.
Nice.
So a few things, I guess, and unless anybody has anything they want to add before we sign off.
No.
Just to backtrack a little bit, you'll be like, why is he bringing this up? This is like, I want to be fair, right? The whole thing about this is, I felt like getting into it, my ability to concentrate was not as good, but we've worked a full day and we're all here doing this. So, but it was still fun. I feel like it got better as it went on, and I did learn some, housekeeping matters about these. I definitely have to have something printed. Again, the reason we didn't do it is our printers are already covered. I wanted to stay more on topic, but I did want to ask to clarification questions along the way. And one of the things I mentioned was, candidate Bailey for governor. And this is exactly what we're talking about, hearing things in context. Really, the ads that I've heard, they're playing one line, like, if I'm elected, I'll repeal that. I would like to hear Mr. Bailey's reason in support of that. You don't get that in the ad because they don't give you it. Because first of all, these political advertising places are only buying like 1 minute long or 30-second time chunks, and they have to like cram in whatever fucking messages that they're trying to cram in your fucking brain and program you with, right? So you just hear this, or they show it in writing that this is a quote attributed to him. And so if he believes it should be repealed, or that he would repeal it on day one, which Congress has to repeal laws. So
Yeah, it's
they
like
would
you're
have to be on board, first of all, with
Yeah.
what his action.
Couldn't do that
You can't just
unilaterally.
repeal this law by executive order. But, I haven't heard the whole thing in context, but maybe there's other reasons that he's referring to. We talked about the very important chunk of that law. There's the Pretrial Fairness Act, which is, they've combined it because this is all, it's within the same relevant topic area, so they're combining these things. Or, I'm not trying to overstate the relevance of all these pieces of law, because I don't know fully what's in there. It's a long law, 700 pages, I think you said earlier. I don't even know if that's accurate, but if it is accurate, over 700 pages is a lot. So there's a lot of things that went into this law. It's like all these phone books stacked on top, right? Like, we do real estate closings. And and Claudia knows this too, because she does them as well. When we do these, a big a stack of loan documents would be like 130 pages, where they have some down payment assistance from the state, blah, blah, blah. That's like almost an inch thick. That's like 3/4 of an inch thick, or
Seems-
something like that.
it's a tree
or whatever
of legislation.
Yes, it's
Yeah.
some of these. People are like, "You guys still use paper all the time?" Yeah, still right now. It's kind of in the next few years it'll probably change over to all electronic, but for now, we're sticking old school here with the paper. It's what it's what they trust or whatever. And there's procedural reasons for that with mortgages, because they're recorded in the public records and all this. But anyway, those are thick. So if that's thick, and that takes an hour or two long to explain to a client, if you're giving them a break, while you're dating it or explaining it, so they know what they're signing. Can you imagine what 700 pages of law is like? So maybe he's talking about other portions of this law. We didn't get into that tonight, and that's fine. So we hope that you found this enlightening as to what we did talk about, and we tried to focus on it
And
on this particular area of this law. And we'll talk. We might do another one, Matt, or have another person who knows more about the other parts of this law come to speak about the rest of it, and to figure out if you're going to make a law that's that large, it's hard to parse out the smaller pieces to determine if the law as a whole, because there's just so much shit crammed into it, is good or not. So we're talking about a very complex law that involves a lot of things, and the
Yeah.
questions about whether it's good or bad in terms of public policy and what's good and in the best interest of public remain to be seen. And we'll have to see how this all plays out. So we weren't here to make a determination either way tonight. We were just focusing on this very narrow piece of the law.
Even the breadth of the law is another point another point we could talk about, whether it's trying to kill too many birds with one stone, whether it could be parceled out or whatnot. And there's something else I was reading about. I can't quote it now off the top of my head. I just glanced over it. But in terms of subject matter covered by the legislation, whether or not it should be parceled out into more separate, distinct pieces of legislation per subject matter, as opposed to all encompassing. So that's another thing we could even talk about later on another time. So.
And Brian, I'm happy you brought that up about Bailey, because they need to explain why. Why is it you oppose this law? Why is it bad that we're giving a higher standard to find, or higher, I'm sorry. Why is it that we are now using the standard of a danger to society versus the danger of money, versus how much money that you have? Okay, and I'd be very interested to know what a politician would have to say to that. So you're telling me money is more?
He may not even be opposed in that specific area of the law.
Yeah.
That's why it's just not fair for people, because short sound bites are inflammatory, and you usually have an emotional response, and it's what you're either pre-programmed to do because it falls in with your beliefs and your ideals, and it just inflames, because most of the time when you have an emotional reaction, or your first reaction, it tends to be emotional, and it tends not to be the best one. When you take a step back and you really think about it and you hear more detail, like what we heard tonight, but you just hear this inflammatory statement, I would repeal it on day one if I were the governor. Do you agree with the what appears to be objective reasonableness in this law?
Yeah.
Or are you just what I would like to know is the things we have to do when people are speaking is assess their genuineness. Does he even really believe this, or was he just trying to get political capital?
Right.
If it's that simple, then the guy's a politician, and he's just doing what everybody else does to get what they want, which is being elected to a position or to unseat the other guy, or they want both of those things. For some people, this is gamemanship, right? But if he's genuine, that's just for political capital. It's not genuine. He's just another politician. But if it's genuine, what are the things in that law, and does he have a reasonable point or not? So those things we don't know will just remain to be heard. But what I disagree with is the 30-second soundbite where you know nothing else
not
other than
helpful.
I would repeal it day one.
Yeah,
because I
it's
can't
just not
assess whether
helpful.
the guy's genuine or not, if he's just trying to get political capital, or if he is there maybe some good reasons that we haven't considered here even this evening that, you know, certain things in there are bad. So out of fairness, hey folks, you know what? Most people are they tune out early, especially as long as we go, but we try to be thorough. I think that's the best way to learn and to really have a fun dialogue and make this good. But the 30-second sound bites are bullshit almost all the time, right?
For real.
You know, like the vast majority of the time, and we're conditioned to hearing them. We make decisions based on them, and just be aware of it, folks, that people are trying to get you to make a decision on something short like that, and those are usually not the best decisions. A lot of the time they're based on emotion. They try to get into your preconceived ideals. They're trying to rally you in one direction or another. Step back, because we know that most of the time both parties are bullshit anyway. So, you know, in my humble opinion, so it's like take a step back and look what they're actually trying to do here. What is their objective? If you're automatically inflamed, then that's probably their goal and mission accomplished. So part of doing better as a society and eliminating division is controlling ourselves and our emotions and being strong in that way. And there's a lot of things that we talk about on this podcast that can help with that. Meditation, yoga, reflection, disconnection from these fucking addictive drug cell phones that we have, right?
Oh, good luck with that.
So, well, that's another thing
Can
that I
only
will be
hope.
talking about as a repeat topic on this podcast. I was actually hoping to get on some psychologists who study the effects of cell phones on young people, their physical abilities like vision with nearsightedness that results from staring at screens too long, and then their my theory is that the reason there's a lot of depression amongst youth now is because their dopamine is burnt out from fucking hitting this all day, and then the rest of real life is boring, and once they've saw everything there is to see.
No, my ears are hurting.
No worries, we're wrapping up.
Yeah.
But those are all, you know, topics I like to discuss of the effects of that on people's mental health and everything.
As people watch this on your cell phone, thank you, by the way.
Yes, thank you. Just maybe make it full screen so it's not too small, or just do audio only. But I also want people to know here that when we talk about this today, like, I didn't want to take a stance either way because there's a lot of information I don't know, but I was very glad to hear an educated perspective on it. I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I'm just saying I was glad to learn some new things, and then, you know, think about them critically in my own mind and ask questions about them. And I think everybody here sitting at this table truly hopes that the justice system gets it right most of the time, and Claudia works to make that happen. And so for true justice, for the good of everybody as a society, we hope that the justice system does get it right in the majority of the time. And to make things more perfect, it takes continued work. You know, if we don't do a podcast for 3 months, it's going to be a little weird coming back. Sometimes you'll do something and it'll be natural, you know, and you pick up where you left off. But I think practice makes perfect. And so we don't have to work extremely hard, but we always have to work hard consistently, I believe. And I apply that to almost every aspect of my life. And so as we sign off here today, you know, I think one of the most important lessons I learned in my life is that everything is contagious. All kinds of emotion are contagious. Happiness, anger, fear. So don't let those things that happen in your mind control you. Take a step back, and just be good to people out there right now. We can't control who ends up, you know, I mean, we can vote, but I can't determine if it's going to be Pritzker or Bailey or Trump or Biden or whoever it is, but I can control the way I treat people every day. And I know that sometimes now it's funny, and I try to work to change this, but it seems like people almost have a weird reaction when we reach out to them. Like, oh my God, like, thank you for just even saying hello or good morning. Like, they didn't expect it as you passed, because most people just breeze quickly past each other, especially in the larger cities like we have here. I was just in Wisconsin. It's like everybody knows everybody. You know, it's the towns of maybe 500 and stuff like that where we go, but we can all act like this is a town of 500 and be nice to each other and make other people happy. You know, I was just in Arby's on the way home from Wisconsin, and I was hungry, and I wondered how other people that were in the restaurant that day treated those people. And I would bet that none of them treat them as nicely as I did, and listen to them and look them in the eye and let them know that they matter and that they're helping me out right now, and it's greatly appreciated. And I changed the mood in that fucking place immediately. If I can do it, you can do it. I'm an Irish kid from the South Side whose father was an immigrant who had to move to Wales, which is within Great Britain, next to Ireland, above it, to just have enough money to come here to America. So if I can do this, everybody else can do it too, and I encourage other people to do it, because kindness is contagious. COVID's contagious. Kindness is contagious. Fucking, if you just work at it, if you apply it, you'll be better off for it. I find the mirror is a universe. What you give it, it'll give it right back to you. You're going to be going around rude and angry. You're going to be fighting fires all day long with your own fire. That's not a good way to go. We don't have a lot of mental energy for it. There's too much important shit going on right now that we need to focus on. And we can be that change that we want. They always say the old saying is be the change you want. We can do that on a small level every day, and that's a small seed that grows bigger, I believe. So, be a good person, be good, because good people make other people good. And so be good to yourself, be good to your family, be good to your community. May truth, reason, and justice prevail. Thank you very much for listening. We love you. Tune in next time to the Blessed Life University podcast. Peace out.
Peace. It's a good wrap up, bro.